Do the math with me, folks. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days times 24, less than 100 hours to college football playoff action. Georgia, Michigan, game 2 at the Orange Bowl. I believe the game everyone's looking forward to a little bit more than the other one. And certainly most of you who love the Dogs and love the Wolverines, we're simulcasting on our Michigan channel, our Georgia channel, our SEC channel, and right here, the Voice of College Football on the main channel. We hope that we've got a number of guests stopping by, including Big Dog Brett, to talk Georgia and Michigan. Going to take all your comments and questions there in the live chat as well. Georgia, Michigan should be a heck of a game, and I don't know any other ways we can break this baby down, but we're going to keep talking about it until they actually kick off. And of course, we're going to be here live after the game to break it all down right here at the Voice of College Football. Please like these videos, share these videos out on social media. So take this link right here and share it out there on Facebook and on Twitter as well, and any other social media platforms that you are involved in, and spread the word that we're talking college football with all of you all the time. Rob J's in the building with a Go Blue. Let's Toast Media, another Go Blue. And here we go. Breaking news coming in of courtesy D-Rock Irish. Well, so Boise State exited the Arizona Bowl against Central Michigan. That happened maybe 4 or 5 hours ago due to COVID. So Central Michigan looking for another team to play, while media outlets mention that the Chippewas may go to the Sun Bowl to take on Washington State. And of course, Washington State and the Sun Bowl looking for an opponent now that Miami has its own COVID issues and they've bailed out of the Sun Bowl. So 3 ACC teams, Miami, Virginia, and Boston College, will not play in their bowl games, and their opponents all looking for foes on the other side of the line. Memphis could not play, and Hawaii in the Hawaii Bowl, and that's another one that we are missing. Our second game that was going to be played today, that game was not played. We had the Western Michigan win over Nevada in the only bowl game of the day, and so we've had 5 bowl games impacted thus far. Are we going to have more glamorous, high-profile bowl games impacted? And are we going to have the college football playoff of the national championship impacted? We can certainly talk about the ramifications there. The College Football Playoff Committee released its guidelines just a few days ago in regards to how it's going to structure and decide the winners of these games and the result of the playoff if certain teams cannot play. So if you have yet to come through that, by that information, what is going to happen is if one team has to forfeit a semifinal game, let's say Georgia has to forfeit against Michigan. Michigan will advance to the national championship game. If both teams cannot play that game, meaning Michigan cannot play, Georgia cannot play in the semifinal game, the other semifinal game will then serve as the national championship game. And that's what we've got right now, which could be rather interesting if, let's say, in that case, Georgia and Michigan can't play and Cincinnati and Alabama play. There's a winner of the game. You've got your national champion, and that could not necessarily be decided for days and days after the semifinal game that was, in fact, the national championship game. As mentioned and announced to everyone, Big Dog Brett's going to join us, and there he is to talk up the Dogs. Hey, Brett, how you doing?
Doing great, Mark. How are you today, sir?
I am doing just fine. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
How was your Christmas and the rest of your holiday season?
Expensive but enjoyable.
Okay. There must be kids in the house.
Yes, we have an 18, 15, about to be 4, and a just turned 1-year-old. So,
whoa,
Busy
covered
house.
the gamut there. That does get expensive. I've only got half of that to deal with, and they've pretty much moved to a place in life where, hey, I still get them gifts, but they know that there's a budget in place. But yeah, 4 of them running around.
Yeah, so it's nice the older 2 can help out on the younger 2 quite a bit, so works out good.
Good stuff. So we want to let everyone know to head on over to Big Dog Brett's channel right here on YouTube. Subscribe, check out the videos and his breakdown of Georgia football. He's got a passion for it. He loves Georgia football. He's knowledgeable. That's why we have him here as well. And again, head on over right here on YouTube and check out Big Dog Brett and also the content that he's placing on our SEC channel in particular. What do you think of these guidelines that the committee put forth in the last few days regarding the playoff and the COVID situation and what's going to happen if a team or teams cannot play?
Well, I think that they're trying to do their best to lay some ground rules to kind of prevent the mass exodus. I think there's a lot of financial influences in especially in college football season, in bowl season. They're already struggling, in my opinion, to keep these extra bowls valid. We've seen a lot of players already check out of some of these games, but I'm not real fluent on what the new rules are, so you might have to give me a refresher real quick.
Yeah, so as I understand it, if let's say Georgia can't play Friday night, then Michigan will automatically advance to the national championship game and play the winner of Cincinnati, Alabama. But if there's a game in which both teams cannot play, let's say Georgia and Michigan, then the other game, let's say that news comes down hours before or a day before the semifinal games on Friday, then the Cincinnati, Alabama game will be deemed as the national championship game.
That I think they're trying to put stopgaps in place so that they can claim a national champion. But I mean, you would have to have both teams, both say Georgia and Michigan, to call it off. And I think what would end up happening is that both of those teams, if at all possible, would wait on the other one to bow out first. And then the other team would just stand there and say nothing, just kind of like when you're playing poker, check. I'm not gonna fold my hand. I'm gonna wait and see what happens. And what could very well happen is that, in my opinion, if that happens on both sides, you could have 2 teams end up playing each other that essentially both skip the game. So I don't know. It could be interesting, but I really hope that's not the case. I hope it plays out to where everybody gets their turn. Everybody's healthy. Everybody stays healthy. And then we can just, have college football the way we want it.
Absolutely. JT Daniels is not going to be able to suit up and play, apparently. And Stetson Bennett, if he's healthy and ready to go and going to play a full game, I don't think that the JT Daniels situation really impacts the game. But you don't have a backup quarterback who has experience or a go-to option if Stetson Bennett's not playing well. So you're talking about that.
It's very rare. It's very rare that somebody gets information before you do. So I'm pretty excited about this. About 30 minutes ago, they announced that JT Daniels had cleared the COVID protocol.
Nice. Okay.
He arrived in Miami, and he will be able to play.
Excellent.
So for those of you who don't know, that's breaking news. This just came out. I actually was going to make a video, but I had already agreed to come on here with Mark. So I figured it'd be a good time to do it then. And Mark, being a gracious host, already opened it up for me. So, it very well looks like he will be there, at least in backup fashion.
Well, you get off here anytime you need to if you need to cut a video, but I don't want your content on your channel to suffer. So JT Daniels is ready. Okay. So that being the case, I don't think there's any question Stetson Bennett's going to start the game. What do you think the circumstances should be in pulling Stetson Bennett? What would this game need to look like and his performance need to look like for you to make a move? And more importantly, what do you think Kirby Smart's thinking?
Well, obviously, I have wildly different opinions of the quarterback situation than what the coaching staff at UGA does. However, I would say that if there's ever a time where Georgia goes down 2 scores, and if one of those is caused by Stetson throwing a pick six, I think he needs to immediately come out of the game. Stetson Bennett has been one of those quarterbacks where he's not going to rally from behind. We've seen that this season when he's been up and ahead. That's great. But the moment that he got into a dogfight with Alabama, it was pretty much over from the start. So for me, if I was the coach, if he goes down 2 scores, especially if one is a result of a pick six, for lack of a better way of saying it, at that point you kind of have to throw some caution to the wind. Damn the torpedoes and ramming speed. You've got to pull it out. All your stops. I would rather be down 14 points and see us put in JT Daniels and then lose the game than I had leave Stetson Bennett in and lose the game anyway. So to me, at least if we lost with JT Daniels, it will quell a lot of the kind of gnashing of teeth in the Georgia fan base as to why didn't we play JT Daniels? Because if you were to put JT Daniels in and you see him struggle and fail, you could say, okay, that's why Kirby Smart has Stetson Bennett in. That's why. However, I don't believe that even if Georgia's down 14 or 17 points, that Kirby Smart's going to pull him. I think it'll take an injury or illness before they'll pull Stetson Bennett. I think in Kirby Smart's mind, he's the most experienced. He does have mobile feet. He's been at all the practices. He's familiar with calling the plays. He just had a bad game. So that being the case, I think they're going to let Stetson play it, good, bad, or otherwise, and I think that may be a mistake.
The Bennett mobility is without question that he has that over JT Daniels. There was no question that he's played more recently against good competition, of course. So those are 2 things you can check off for Stetson Bennett. But as you size up these 2 players based on everything you've seen, everything you've read, how do you compare them otherwise, the good and the bad?
Well, Stetson Bennett is a mobile quarterback enough. He's mobile enough. And I think sometimes he used to try and make too much with his feet. Now, I think, especially in the Alabama game, there was a couple of times he gave up on the run a little too soon. One particular time, he probably could have picked up nearly a first down and kind of throws a lackluster hodgepodge of a pass downfield, and it doesn't really make contact, and it ended up being, Georgia had to punt it away. One thing I will point out, a lot of Georgia fans don't necessarily know this. I'm kind of a stats junkie. Stetson Bennett is currently the 4th top rusher on the team, ahead of 4-star running back Kendall Milton. He has fewer attempts, more yards, and more yard average. Just as many touchdowns rushing as Kendall Milton. And Kendall Milton is known for being a great running back. So in my opinion, Stetson Bennett's mobility certainly helps him. His all-purpose yards, he's approaching 3,000. Now, JT Daniels, I think he has a much better passing efficiency style than Stetson Bennett. I've seen JT Daniels make every pass, and very few times has he thrown a bad pass. Times I have seen him throw a bad pass, it's because he was injured. There's a certain type of rhythm that the offense seems to develop whenever JT is behind center. And that particular player that seems to make the most out of that is George Pickens, which will be back for this game. JT Daniels has one incredible arm for strength and downfield throws. He can stand on the 40-yard line on our side and throw to the goal line. So take into consideration how big of a pass that has to be, and he can hit a runner in stride. It's incredible. Now, on top of that, the flip side is that because Stetson can't make those throws, it takes away part of the offense where we have elite speed. Amari, one of those guys, they can absolutely take the top off of the defense. They can really become a deep ball threat, but you've got to have a quarterback who can throw it down there. What I've noticed a lot of times, especially with UGA fans, is that, oh, he made a deep ball pass. Great. But did you watch what the receiver had to do? Most of the time, the receivers had to either stop running and come back to the ball or slow his route down significantly. That allows safeties and cornerbacks to close the gap, and this reduces your ability to make a touchdown on those big gamble plays like that. When you can make an explosive play and you can if you can get a good wide receiver who's a step or two ahead of a defensive back or ahead of a corner, it's a touchdown. The speed is too much for him to overcome it 2 or 3 steps as fast as those guys run. If the receiver has to stop, that's basically where he gets tackled.
Okay, this briefly off the Georgia-Michigan topic, but I just wanted to address this. So it's just me, Tim79, making a comment about the Hawaii Bowl being canceled. So the money's not made in the stands. It's just me, Tim79. The money is made on television. So sure, does a bowl make more money if there's 75,000 people that bought tickets and go to the concessions and buy merchandise? Absolutely. That's a significant amount of money. But it's a drop in the bucket compared to, oh, we had to cancel the game. Even if there are only going to be 12,000 people in the stands, they don't care that much about that. We had to cancel a game. All the advertising money for that bowl game on Christmas Eve, gone, shot. Millions of dollars, way over anything that they're going to earn at the park for the game. All right.
To talk about the funding of it, let's say that you have a top tier football team like Georgia, and I'll say Texas. And I know some people are going to say Texas is not top tier. Texas is top tier when it comes to revenue.
Sure.
That team generates a lot of revenue. If we go back to 2018 and we wind the clocks back and we don't really pay too much attention to what's happened here recently, kind of throw those numbers out. If you go back to 2018, Georgia will make anywhere from $140 to $180 million a year, and that's just the Georgia program. Imagine what they're making on the TV contracts. It's extremely large.
I used to give tours at ESPN, and basically they were tours of executives that would be coming in from other companies or whatever, and I just give them a tour of the production facilities and so forth. And one of my favorite questions was, because I knew that this would stump most people because they're looking at all the equipment and the fancy equipment and the production trucks and looking at all that. And I'd say, what do you think the most expensive portion of doing sports television is? And they would start naming off all the equipment and all that stuff and how much money people get paid. I'd say, oh, that costs a lot of money. You could go in one little master control and it cost $1 million, but I'd say just the rights fees to broadcast the NFL and the NBA and college football. That's where the biggest price tag is. Absolutely. We've got a super chat coming in. We appreciate that so much. Lil Coda, let's be honest. JT or Bennett, the Georgia offensive line cannot stop must be a Michigan fan, our edge rushers. We are going to have them off balance. And as for Davis, all we have to do is run tempo. I do not see them stopping our run. Sorry. So big Michigan fan is very confident.
Do you want to destroy this comment, or do you want me to do it?
It'll be more entertaining if you do it.
Fair enough. You guys have 2 edge rushers and just 2 that are good. The rest are competent. You have 2 that are elite. Those guys rarely play every snap of every game. So you're going to have certain plays where they don't even have to be accounted for. Georgia's offense is going to basically line up and account. Their play is going to be predicated off of what you line up for on defense, period. If Hutchinson lines up on the left-hand side, Georgia's going to go to the right with Brock Bowers. If he lines up on the right, Georgia's going to go to the left with James Cook. They will play keep away from him all night. He will be a non-factor. in the point in time, whenever you do load in both of these players, Georgia is going to get pushed in the middle and they're going to run the ball. Georgia's averaged 5 or 6 yards against some pretty massive offensive and defensive line, some pretty massive defensive lines all season. So I think it would be a little bit premature to say Georgia's not going to be able to run the ball. Georgia was able to run the ball against Alabama. And I would wager to say that Alabama's offense or defensive line has far more 5 stars than what Michigan may have. And they're probably under the best coach of all time. And Georgia could run the ball against them. So I can understand that you want to have some faith in your edge rushers, but Georgia's going to play to that. Now, as far as Davis, I'm going to tip you guys off to this, and you can spend a little bit of time and go check it out. Georgia has played, well, you probably don't know this because you're a Michigan fan. Georgia starts working outside in the heat in the summer for conditioning. If you've ever seen Jordan Davis actually run at top speed, he runs close to 20 miles an hour. So that's not a guy who's out of shape. So he's played in multiple games where we've played up-tempo defenses. We've played defenses that had some big, strong guys, and Jordan Davis didn't get tired. So to say that we're 13 games into a season, all of a sudden a little bit of up-tempo makes Jordan Davis tired seems a little bit odd. Now, from what I can find, it seems like against Alabama, and I haven't talked about this because I don't want to get the excuses thing. But if you look into it, you'll find that there is some information that there were guys on Georgia's defensive line that were recovering from being sick. That makes you tired. So I would stand to say that Jordan Davis having 4 weeks to completely recover, you're going to see a different guy altogether. Not once all season, no matter who we have played, have I ever seen Jordan Davis stand up and put both hands on his hips in the first quarter. I haven't seen Jordan Davis stand up and put both hands on his hips in the fourth quarter of most games. So I just don't believe that Alabama running a little bit of up-tempo in the first quarter completely exhausted Jordan Davis. And if you feel that way, you might want to take a few moments to go back and actually watch his highlight tapes, and you'll see how dominant he is.
So the one thing I will say about Georgia running the ball against Alabama, I'm looking at the numbers because I didn't certainly look at it that way in the SEC championship game. So James Cook had 11 carries for 38 yards. Kenny McIntosh 4 for 32. Zamir White 7 for 27. So throw them all together and you've got 22 carries for 22 for 97.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's pretty good. Is that 11? Yeah, 22 for 97. Yeah, so about what's that? About 4.5 yards per carry.
Thereabouts.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So I mean, you if you can run the ball for 4.5 yards a carry against the number 1 team in the country, I'd say you can move the football fairly decently.
And the number 2 rushing defense in the country, more
Correct.
importantly. And I'm sure whoever was number 1, maybe Wisconsin, maybe Georgia. Anyway, the other thing that comes to mind in regards to the comment made here about the Michigan ends that I'm going to be curious to see. Ohio State had faith in its tackles, and they had too much faith in their tackles. They should have given them more help. They have 3 of the best wide receivers in the country. They were doing all the damage downfield. They didn't need their tight end downfield. He's a really good pass catcher. He's nowhere close to Bowers in regards to athleticism downfield catching the ball, but he'll have a long career in the NFL as long as he doesn't get hurt. But they needed to keep backs and tight ends in to protect and let their wide receivers do damage. Do you think Georgia's going to have that kind of faith in its tackles to hold up on an island?
Well, here's what I'll say is I've actually took the time to go look up the size of Ohio State's offensive line and defensive line, and go look at the size of the Michigan of Iowa's defensive line. And what you'll find is they have like 2 guys, maybe 3. I think it's 3 on each team that are over 300 pounds. That is a mountain and a mile difference between the size and speed of Georgia. Georgia's offensive and defensive lines are monsters. They're not tiny guys. Most of these guys are 6'5" and above. One of the offensive line guys, I think it's for Ohio State, is 224 pounds. I mean, for goodness sake, I'm bigger than that. So I don't believe that Michigan being bigger is going to have
an Ohio
any.
State offensive lineman that's 224. Not to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah, I'll see if I can find it. Oh, by the way, for the gentleman who said, there was a guy up here who said Jordan Davis at 20 miles an hour, laughing out loud. Wallace Johnson. Mr. Wallace Johnson, if you'll take a moment and you'll go to Google and check out Jordan Davis mile per hour, you will see that his speed is posted at 19.8 miles per hour. And that's on 24/7 Sports. That's not from me. But I will find that stat real quick. I think it was Ohio State defensive line. And then I went to football roster. The guy was a freshman. See if I can find it real quick. Cornerbacks. There's a defensive tackle who's 305. I'm not looking at the ends. Defensive end 265. Obviously, I have more time than what I should have to be able to go.
Comments, and we'll fill the time if we need to.
Here's one at 245. That's tight end defensive end 250. That's a back. I'm not worried about backs. Where's it at? That's a back. That's an end 275. Tackle 290.
James Cooper says Michigan leads the country in place of 50, 60, and 70 yards. Good luck. The Georgia dude just assumes that Ajabo and Hutch are just, quote, good. Have you ever watched Michigan this year? And you don't have to answer these questions. I'm just reading while you're.
No, fire away. I'm good with it. It may have been Iowa then. Let me check here. Yes, I have watched. I actually spend quite a bit of time watching highlight films and seeing what everybody's out there doing and how they're doing and how do they play. Are they playing spread offense? Are they playing man coverage? Are they playing defense? I mean, what are they playing? Dime nickel package. Are they playing, who's playing star? That sort of thing. I mean, I spend quite a bit of time watching. I'm betting you. No, that's not this one. I'm betting you that it was Iowa that had this guy who's a defensive lineman who's 225. Sort by position. Defensive lineman.
Yeah, if you go by the 247 Sports team talent rankings.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I looked at those recently. Ohio State and Georgia are pretty comparable with Alabama, and Michigan's 9th, something like that.
I gave you the wrong number. It was not 224. It was 232, and that's for Iowa. So that was my mistake. There's a defensive end that's 224, but they have a lineman who's 232 pounds. So it's not huge.
If you look at and believe in the talent rankings, which this isn't everything, obviously teams play above their heads and teams underachieve. We do see Florida's number 7, and we could go through a bunch of teams. USC's number 10. So coaching counts, development counts, all those things count. But if you look at the top 6, and that's the 2021 team talent rankings, according to 247 Sports, what you basically have is the college football playoff. You have the history of the college football playoff with the top 6 teams. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, LSU, Oklahoma. Those are all the teams that have routinely played in the playoff, done anything in the playoff. Those are the top 6. Michigan's at 15.
Now, keep in mind that to put that into perspective, Miami and Texas and Florida are all above them in this talent ranking.
And USC.
Correct. USC as well. One of the things I pointed out on a video that I made earlier today is if you go back and you look at the recruiting classes from 2018 to 2021, which is 4 years, how many total 5-stars do you think Michigan has recruited?
Since when?
2018. Not counting the 2022 class, just 2021. And
I've got it right in front of me.
Oh, you got it?
I'm looking at the team talent rankings.
Oh.
So that's probably close to what that is. 3.
3. And Georgia? 19.
19.
So Michigan has recruited 41 4-stars. Georgia has recruited 47. Georgia has more 5-stars than any other team. They've got 5 more 5-stars than Alabama in the recruiting rankings and the talent rankings. So to say, when I say that Georgia has a lot more talent, a lot deeper talent, that's where that comes from. Now,
Sure.
I get not all 5-stars, not all 5-stars are phenom talents, but that is a brush that is painted equally and evenly across every team. So for Michigan fans to say, oh, well, not every 5-star, you're correct. You have the same problem. Not every 5-star turns into a phenom.
Absolutely. And you see a separation there. Georgia's got 19, Ohio State 16, Alabama 14, Clemson then with 10, and then everybody else is in single digits. This Texas A&M recruiting haul for 22 is quite the stacked class. So they're going to be jumping up there.
Let's see. Mike 3883 asks, what star is JT and Stetson? JT Daniels is a 5-star, and Stetson Bennett was a walk-on. Stetson Bennett actually left Georgia, went to play JUCO, and then came back as a 3-star and became a walk-on. He became a scholarship player as a 3-star. But initially, unless I'm mistaken, and Mark may correct me here, but he was a walk-on initially.
Yes.
So JT Daniels, before he reclassified, he was actually the number 1 quarterback in the nation, unless I'm mistaken, ahead of Trevor Lawrence and JT Daniel. And we both know how those guys panned out.
So then also in the quarterback room for Georgia, you got Carson Beck and you got Brock Vandergriff. And both of those guys are high 4 into 5-star territory.
Brock Vandergriff is a 5, I believe, and Carson Beck is a 4. We had Jamie Mathis, and I believe he was a 4-star. We had the guy that transferred from Wake Forest, Jamie Newman. Jamie Newman, I believe, was a 5-star, and he ended up going over to Temple. So right now, currently, Georgia has, I think, 2 5-stars on the bench, 1 4-star. Trust me, nobody's more upset about the quarterback situation at Georgia than I am. I don't blame Justin Fields for going to OSU at all. I said in many videos that was absolutely the best place for him to go, that Georgia wasn't going to be able to develop him with the amount of talent he had. And he proved me right. So I'm happy for him. 5 stars, it just matters what they do on the field. It should be a good game. Michigan 27-17. Watching these comments, it's almost like everybody forgot what Georgia did to every other team they played, and now all of a sudden Michigan is as good as Alabama.
Well, that's like, for example, I produce a bunch of videos where I broke down the statistics, Georgia versus Michigan, Cincinnati, Alabama, to a T. I went through yards per play. I went through 3rd down conversions, 4th down, red zone percent, the whole thing. And I had a bunch of people comment, well, those are stats and they're not going to play on the field with stats. The stats are the results of the play on the field. when you have a really good team that makes plays and you win games like these teams have, obviously your stats are going to be really good. No, they don't take those stats to the field and win, but they've been playing 13 games, all these teams, and they've accumulated these stats based on the performance on the field.
Right.
So they're reflective of how good they are.
So when I look at Georgia's schedule during the current season, because you have to weigh teams against who they played, up until the point where Ohio State lost to Michigan, the strength of schedule here was just about 0. The only other ranked team Michigan played, they lost to. It was the fact that they were going into the Big Ten championship game, and they win that game, and all of a sudden, they're the best team in the country. But it's like they forgot what happened on October 30th when they lost to Michigan State, or 2 weeks before that when they barely beat Nebraska 32-29. when they barely beat Rutgers by a touchdown, 20-13. And I'm not trying to, or barely beat Penn State by 4 points. You got to look at this and you got to say, which team has been more consistent? Which team has been dialed in the whole season versus, well, I mean, Michigan beats Ohio State and it was shock and awe. And they said, well, if they can get past Iowa, and then they came out there and Iowa had a terrible game and Michigan had a great game, and all of a sudden they're just going to demolish Georgia. Now, Mark, you may have to help me with the stat on this. What is the Big Ten's record versus the SEC?
Well, I don't have the aggregate record, but I'll say this: over what period of time?
Oh, I'll just do the whole thing.
Like the last 10 years?
I'll do all 153 all-time meetings. The
Okay.
SEC holds the score. Excuse me. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think we really care what happened in 1950. I will make this. I know the landscape of college football, and I will tell you that the SEC wins about 65% of the time that it plays the Big Ten.
So, I mean, you're looking at a pretty strong performance that seems in the past to show that the SEC is an overall more difficult conference. If it was not, it would not have as many not just bowl appearances, but bowl wins. Not to mention the number of SEC champions that go on to become national champions. I think all but maybe 2 seasons we had an SEC team in the in the college football playoff.
And
been there every year.
Draft selections.
Yeah. So when I see that, it's Alabama curb stomped Georgia. Yes, they did. They absolutely did.
Yeah. So I don't have any confusion about the best conference in college football. For the first time in a long time, I actually am very decided on the best conference, the second best conference, the third best conference, the fourth best conference, and the fifth best conference. I'm usually like, well, they're the best, and then second and third's pretty close, and I really would have to grind the numbers and really think about it and seed it. But I don't think there's any question that the SEC is the best conference. I don't think there's any question that the Big Ten is the second best conference. I don't think there's any question that the Big 12 is the third best conference, that the ACC is fourth, and the Pac-12 is just awful.
Yeah, they're way off the chart. And if they keep messing around,
they might not be fifth.
They might not be fifth.
The thing I'll say about when you brought up ranked teams, and I do the same thing, just it's one measurement. And just because a team's ranked, it's nothing magical. You could be number 25 in the country and be no better than the team that is not ranked, that is getting votes. But it's a barometer. Obviously, if you're ranked fifth in the country, you must be pretty damn good.
Right.
But I tend to look at what I just kind of categorize as quality teams. And I've probably not heard it as much as you, but have been asked about Georgia's schedule a bunch of times. I consider Clemson, regardless of their issues early in the season, they righted the ship. They played Georgia very well. I have no doubt that Clemson is one of the 15 best teams in the country. I have no doubt that Arkansas is one of the 15 or 20 best teams in the country. These teams are losing games in the SEC because they're playing other SEC teams. Arkansas blew out Texas. They took Ole Miss to a great 52-51 game the week after they got just annihilated by Georgia. Arkansas is a really good team. They played Alabama close. They beat Texas A&M. And then, so I'll say that those two teams, in my mind at least, are the two best teams that Georgia played, and then probably Kentucky after that. And then there's a collection of teams that I know that they get dismissed as being bad teams, but they're not bad teams. They're actually really talented teams that had issues. LSU, extremely talented team. Obviously, they didn't play Georgia. I'm sorry. Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, those kind of teams. Talented teams, plenty of talent. If we looked at these team talent rankings, they'd all be in the top 15 to 18 in the country. Very talented teams that just had issues. Certainly, we saw Florida take Alabama to the wire. We saw what LSU could do on it. I don't know why I keep going to LSU. Auburn. But the same thing would go with Michigan's schedule. I think Penn State's a quality team in particular, and Wisconsin is a really good team as well. I consider those to be quality teams that are roughly top 15 to 20, 25 in the nation.
Well, there's some things I want to point out against some of the teams that Georgia played. And you're right. You're absolutely right. When Georgia played Arkansas was averaging around, I think it was like 36 or 37 points a game, and Georgia completely shut them out. The very next week, they go play Ole Miss, and they score 51 points against Ole Miss. Now, that's from going 0 to 51, and they played that on the road. They scored 51 points at Missouri. So Arkansas doesn't get as much credit as they should. They were third in the SEC West, and this is a team that's made a dramatic turnaround over the past few years with Sam Pittman. They're well coached. They play hard football. If they win that Auburn game, I think that pushes them into second place. So they just a really quality football team here, and Georgia. Georgia absolutely dominated them. Georgia shut 3 teams out this season, and 2 of those were SEC opponents. So this isn't a team that's just going to lay down. Y'all cannot beat Bama. Georgia fans in the same position Michigan was until we broke through this season. We are conference champs. You are not, and we play a weaker side of the SEC. So stop it. The only problem with that argument is that, to start with, y'all cannot beat Alabama isn't much of an argument, sir. That's a very weak argument. The reason that's a weak argument is because 99% of college football teams can't beat Alabama. That's like saying you can't, just for an argument's sake, you can't knock out Superman. You suck because you can't knock out Superman. 99% of the teams can't. 99% of people can't. So I appreciate that thought. Now, as far as the weaker side of the SEC, it may be the weaker side of the SEC, but consider that we played 4 games that were SEC, not SEC opponents. We played 4 games total. I think it was SEC. Arkansas is SEC West. Auburn's SEC West, and Alabama. That's 3 teams right there. So we about 40% of our schedule was SEC West teams. So that doesn't necessarily hold a lot of water. We shut out one of those teams, and the other team only scored 10 points. So I find that difficult to hold a lot of water, sir. Look at the awards Michigan has won this season. Georgia's won a ton of awards as well. I mean, it's who's going to play that day. And if you're looking at size, Georgia's deeper and has more talent.
S. Hobson makes an interesting point here. I don't think it's as simple as that, but he makes a good point, he or she, I should say. So here's my evaluation of Cade McNamara and Stetson Bennett. I think they're pretty similar quarterbacks, and I've seen both of them play a lot of football. I think they're similar, but Stetson Bennett tends to make the 2 or 3 big mistakes in a game, and Cade McNamara has not done that.
I think he made a couple of mistakes in, was it the Iowa game? It might have been, let me go back and check. I think it was the Iowa game that he made a couple of mistakes. I think he threw 2 interceptions in that game.
He had a bad pick against Ohio State the second drive of the game.
And was it Ohio State he threw 2 picks in that game?
He threw 1 against Ohio State.
It was one of these games he threw a couple of picks in. But that really doesn't seem to hurt Michigan all that much. I mean, if you can score 42 points and you throw an interception, that's not hurting you. I think saying that the quarterback who throws the least amount of picks is the winner, it really depends on the style of play. I think when Georgia played South Carolina, let's see. No, that's not it. Which one was it? There was a game we played in where I don't think we threw the ball at all. Like maybe 5 or 6 times. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But of course we didn't throw a touchdown. We threw a touchdown or interception or whatever it was, but we didn't make a lot of mistakes because we weren't throwing the ball.
So, I think you only threw about that many passes against Arkansas.
Yeah, I think it was Arkansas. I think we threw like almost none. Let me pull that up real quick. So we threw 11 passes for 7 receptions. So we threw 7 passes for 72 yards. I mean, Georgia's total yards in that game was 345. Georgia dominated that game. We had 22 first downs. Arkansas had 9. So to say that Georgia has to run the ball, maybe. We don't necessarily have to pass it. I don't think Arkansas necessarily has to pass it to win, but I think if you're going to win this game, you're going to have to be balanced. That's the only way you're going to win.
So I'm not going to pin you down on a prediction because you got your own channel, and we want everybody to head on over to Big Dog Brett to get his prediction. And if you make predictions, which I'm assuming you do, and the rest of your videos on over there. So again, Big Dog Brett, he's been nice enough to come on here and break down Georgia football. So head on over to his YouTube channel. I'll ask it like this, though. And maybe some people get irritated that I answer their questions like this when they want predictions. Because I look at it like this. All that matters is, of course, what happens in Miami in Hard Rock Stadium for 3.5 hours that night. They could be completely different teams if they played tonight. I'm exaggerating, not completely different teams, but the outcome could be slightly different. Shoot, Georgia and Alabama could have played the next day, and it wouldn't have been 41-24. We don't know what it would have been. It would have been something different. But all that matters is, of course, who shows up and makes the plays on that particular night. And we know throughout the college football season that throw out a percentage. I'm going to say 20 or 25% of the time, probably the better team doesn't win. Now, again, all that matters is that they won that game. But we know that the Vegas favorite doesn't win all the games. So if Georgia and Michigan, if it was physically possible for them, because this is what I would love to see. This is fantasy land. This is, would have to be computed by God. If Georgia and Michigan could play 100 times, because that would give us a true ironclad definition. This is the better team. These are the results. How many times would Georgia beat Michigan if they played 100 times?
Well, here this is going to send a lot of trolls over to my channel, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, sometimes whenever your favorite team is the team you're talking about, people automatically assume that you're a homer and that you're just saying that because you're a homer. I did about a 25-minute video or breakdown as to why I have this belief. I would say 80 to 85% of the time Georgia should win this game. Just looking at the talent that's there. When you're doing computer simulations and they're stacking talent against talent, you always see one side has a bigger wave than the other one. And when those two waves hit one another, that bigger wave is usually going to push over. And I think that's what you're going to see here. I'm not saying Michigan's not a quality football team, and I don't mean to come off as smug. But my opinion is that if you told me blindly, if you take logos off jerseys, you take names off jerseys, you take all that stuff off, and you say, okay, one team shut out 3 teams this season. That same team, that same team throughout their entire schedule also held 1, 2, 3 teams to just 1 touchdown, 2 teams to just field goals. So throughout the course of the season, only 1 team in a normal regular season scored more than 13 points. I would say that sounds like a pretty solid team. What kind of talent do they have? They have an average quarterback, and they have 15 5-stars. They have 40-something 4-stars. Okay, what about the other team? Well, the other team, they've had some pretty good moments in their defenses, but every team except 3 scored more than a touchdown. They lost to a team they probably shouldn't have lost to in a regular season. They also barely escaped 2 or 3 teams during a normal season. And they only have 3 or 4 5 stars, and they have 44 stars. And I would say, okay, you tell me what you think. Because I'm going to pick the team that's had a more dominant defensive record. Never mind the conferences, never mind any of that. Quarterbacks, I would say, are equal. I'd say that's a wash. I would say the running backs probably lean a little bit more towards Michigan, but not enough to make a dramatic factor difference because the defense of the other team is so good. The teams that are going to beat Georgia, if they're going to beat them, are going to have to be passing teams. That's why I say that this particular matchup, if you just look at numbers and stats and stars, it should be Georgia, and it shouldn't be close.
Yeah, anytime I found myself defending Georgia, and again, I'm not a Georgia fan, so I had no reason to defend them in any such way. I just talk football and just speak it the way it presents itself to me, is that, yeah, you can knock Georgia's schedule to a certain extent, but I think I did a decent job of letting everyone know that Georgia's schedule is quality. Nobody's out there playing Ohio State and Oklahoma and Clemson and Ole Miss every week. those schedules don't exist. So find the team that's got some stacked schedule. It doesn't exist because everybody plays in a conference, so they play from the top to the bottom in the conference. Some kind of 8 out of the other 13 teams, and then they usually play a really good team outside the conference, and they play 3 cupcakes outside the conference, and that's what Georgia did. You look at Auburn, you look at Clemson, despite their offensive struggles, you look at Arkansas with the 0 on the scoreboard, and you look at those teams. Tennessee, when Tennessee took on Georgia, Tennessee was on a roll. They were rushing for a zillion yards. They were scoring tons of points against everybody, against not great teams, but against decent teams, South Carolina, Missouri, bowl teams. And Kentucky, they put up 45 points on Kentucky, a really good team, a team that's a top 20 team in the country. And they match up against, I'll take Tennessee, for example, because we're talking about them. Then they match up against Georgia. They take the opening drive, they score a touchdown. And then after that, nothing. They can't do anything until it's garbage time. South Carolina turned out to be a really good team. I shouldn't say a really good team. They turned out to be a capable team. They turned out to be a lot better than I thought they were. They, of course, couldn't do anything. Auburn's a team that took Alabama to 4 overtimes, that beat Ole Miss by 11 points. Auburn's a pretty good team. Are they a great team? No, they're flawed, but they're loaded with talent. And again, they played Georgia pretty well into the third quarter, but the talent disparity just kind of wore on them, and they got suffocated, and they couldn't do anything offensively. And what was the final score? 34-10?
Yep. It was not pretty. So when Georgia came into to Auburn, we went to Auburn, and Auburn's a tough place to play. Even Alabama fans will tell you Auburn's a tough place to play. 34-10, and Stetson Bennett threw for 234 yards or 231 yards. We had a 135-yard receiver in Ladd McConkey in that game, and that's a receiver that gets overlooked a lot and probably shouldn't. But Ladd McConkey has a ton of ability, coupled with Brock Bowers being able to be, I think if not the number 1 tight end in the country, at least second. And then you're going to have George Pickens is going to be back. And we could have a whole conversation on the difference that George Pickens can make in a game. I would say the amount of difference that George Pickens can make in a game is as much as Mechie can make in a game, or the impact that he has when he comes out. When he came out of the game in the second half for Alabama due to injury, their offense started to stagnate quite a bit. But it was too late for that. Georgia couldn't catch up. George Pickens has an ability like no other receiver I've seen. I can name probably 5 receivers on my hand that I have seen do the things he does. And I believe all of them are in the NFL or have recently left. So George Pickens is insane.
So I would think that the typical Michigan fan, and I'll put myself in their place, would see, okay, we just talked about Georgia's regular season schedule and all the decent teams they played and what they did against them, which was dominance. Clemson was the only team that really stood toe-to-toe with them. And statistically, Georgia had the strong upper hand in that game, even though it was 10-3 and they had a pick six. Georgia was moving the ball between the 20s. Clemson really didn't do anything in that game. But they, to their credit, it was a 3-3 game if you're just looking at the two offenses against each other. And then, of course, who was it that had the pick six for Georgia? Anyway, they won on a pick six, 10-3. So we talked about regular season dominance over decent teams. What happened against Alabama? Because I got to think your typical Michigan fan is saying, maybe we're not as good as Alabama, but Alabama just beat Georgia by 17. Why can't we take the same game tape? We've got a tremendous running back in Hassan Haskins. We've got a tremendous change up off of him and Blake Corum to do some stuff in space. We've got really good receivers. We've got an offensive line. These guys are going to play in the NFL, a number of them. I don't have them all scouted, but I'm going to guess 3 out of 5 will play in the NFL and so forth. And now to compare Bryce Young and Kate McNamara, we won't even start there. We won't even go into that territory because there's no comparison. Bryce Young
no
is phenomenal.
Comparison, no.
But you got to understand, and I think you do, even if you disagree with it, how somebody would look at that and say, can't Michigan do some of that and maybe win by 3, not by 17?
Well, first of all, the thing that I would point out, and I think that we should point out immediately, is that what separated Alabama from Georgia in this game had nothing to do with the run. It had everything to do with Bryce Young throwing for 421 yards, throwing for 26 for 44. I mean, when you've got a guy in there who's throwing at that incredible number, you're not going to beat that guy easily. And Georgia just couldn't get it done. I don't see that offensive firepower capability from Michigan on anything on their schedule so far. Bryce Young had his best game, in my opinion, and that's what they needed to win this game. So for me, when I look at what happened in the Georgia-Alabama game, I have to ask myself this question: was it that Alabama had the best game of their season and that Georgia had their worst, or is Alabama just that good? The deciding factor in that is that you have to look at Alabama's schedule. So Alabama played 4 of the same teams we played. Out of the 4 teams that we played, that they played, we demolished those teams versus where, in the case of Florida, Alabama won by 2 points. In the case of Tennessee, they beat them soundly 52-24, but Tennessee scored a trash touchdown against Georgia at the very end of the game. Otherwise, they only would have scored 10 points.
And as you know, Tennessee was only down 24-17 early fourth quarter.
Correct.
Yeah.
Tennessee was in that game for quite a while, right up until the end. Arkansas almost won this game. It was 42-35. Alabama beats Arkansas 42-35. Georgia demolishes Arkansas 37-0 or something along those lines. And then Georgia did the same thing to Auburn 34-10 versus where Alabama only beat them by 2. So these are the same teams we're playing in the same season. And the question is it that they played bad games on all these days and they played their regular, normal, everyday game against Georgia, and Georgia's just that bad? And that Georgia played that good against all 4 of those other teams all season? Or is it that Georgia had a bad game and Alabama had a good game? I think that's entirely plausible, especially when you consider that the game 1 week before Alabama plays Georgia, The score against Auburn was 10-10 at the end of regulation. So either Alabama can have bad games and they're not as good as everybody thinks, or Georgia had a bad game and they might be as good as we thought they were. One of those has got to be true.
And for anybody that watched the Iron Bowl, you know that if Auburn would have managed the clock, Alabama would not even have had a chance to win. The game would have been over.
Tank Bigsby runs out of bounds. There was no reason for him to run out of bounds. All he had to do was slide. He could have just slid. I'm not even going to get into that because I can't cheer for Auburn. It's against my religion. But that would have put Alabama in the SEC championship, but likely out of the college football playoff.
So we'll read this super chat from S. Hobson just to honor that. We appreciate that, sir. Georgia made Alabama look good. The pick six was a TD for Georgia, but Bennett missed it. Interception in red zone also. D had 7 busted, I guess, coverages, and 2 went for TDs. Yep. Bad game.
So I can tell there's a lot of people comment in the comment section that don't like my opinion, and that's okay. I'm used to people not liking my opinion.
We're simulcasting this on the Michigan channel, so there's a lot of Michigan people chiming in.
Hey, I'm perfectly okay with you guys coming over to my channel, and we can have a discussion about whatever it is you guys want to talk about, and we can go back and forth. But college football talk is a lot of fun to me, and I really do appreciate everybody's differing opinions. If we all had the same opinion, it'd be extremely boring. Georgia made Alabama look good. Yes and no. Bama helped itself tremendously, and Georgia did a great job of helping them do it. The pick six for a touchdown hurt us. Absolutely, that would hurt any team. Georgia also had a pass for a touchdown to Brock Bowers that got knocked away or dropped that most of the time we make that pass. That would have made it a little bit closer, and you're right. Bennett did miss that. Interception in the red zone killed a drive for us. That's true, too. When you say the defense had 7 busts, at least 7, and they were bad. They were extremely bad. They were so bad that people were messaging me during the game asking if we were throwing the game for some reason. You can't play like that against anybody. I go back a few years ago, and I look at whenever Georgia played South Carolina, and we lost. I think we turned the ball over 4 times. And this was a South Carolina team. We should have been able to just hand the ball off every single down and win that game. But, sometimes you lose games you should win, and sometimes you win games you should lose.
So here's my question, because we started off this conversation talking about talent. And again, some people don't believe as much in the recruiting rankings, but all you have to do is go through wins and losses and go through the final AP rankings in any season. And yes, there are aberrations. Wisconsin outplays and outperforms and outdevelops its talent. Texas underachieves. Yes, there are aberrations, but it's very, very accurate among the masses. There's no question about that. Well, we know that Michigan beat an Ohio State team that was just about as talented as Georgia, and Michigan closed that gap and won the game. So what would you say either to that, or if Ohio State was in this game? If Ohio State beat Michigan as they were expected to by, let's say, a touchdown to 10 points, and then this was Ohio State playing Georgia instead with the talent rankings of what they are, what would you say there?
I would say that I think Ohio State did pretty much the identical thing Georgia did, which was think that they were going to win this game, no problem. The scores were even similar. I mean, it was 42-27 and 41-24. Ohio State had opportunities to win this game. I thought there were several times that C.J. Stroud looked good in this game, but unfortunately, they couldn't seem to get it together. They made crucial mistakes. I think the biggest problem here, just my opinion, I think that Ohio State struggled way more with stopping the run than what they thought they were going to. They really thought they were going to be able to stop the rush. But Michigan ran for almost 300 yards. And anytime you have a team who's running for 300 yards, that's really, really bad, especially whenever you can't run and you only end up at about 2 yards a carry. To me, there was the passing aspect was certainly there. He threw for almost 400 yards, but it was Michigan being able to stop the run that really stifled Ohio State, in my opinion. Now, why do I think Ohio State lost this game to Michigan? I think Michigan outcoached them. I think it was a talent issue, and I think as far as not a talent issue, I don't think it was a talent issue. I think it was they just got outcoached. I think Ohio State kind of started to struggle, and from that point, it was just too much to catch up for them.
Yeah, and home field advantage does matter. Obviously,
Absolutely.
These games, when you talk Georgia, Alabama, they played neutral site. This game's going to be a neutral site, and Michigan not taking anything away from a tremendous advantage or a tremendous game and slaying the dragon and getting over the hump, and that was just a huge game for them. But they did have a huge home field advantage.
I will, for the Michigan fans that are out there, it's probably your first time ever watching me. I try to be as analytical as possible, but I try to give you guys information that you may not necessarily have. A lot of teams travel well. Their fan base travels well. I have never seen a fan base that travels as well as Georgia. I'm going to let you guys know right now. I have never seen a fan base, and that's not me being a homer. That's me watching college football and looking in the stands whenever Georgia went to play Notre Dame, and almost 80% of that stadium was Georgia fans. When I went to the Belk Bowl, and it was all Georgia fans, watching the way Georgia fans show up to the games is incredible. The UGA spring game on G-Day, which was in April a couple of years ago, can you name the last time you've seen a spring game, not just at full capacity, but them actually close the gates and stop letting people in? It's incredible to see how well these fans travel. So I would not be surprised if Georgia has a home field advantage to a point in Miami. It's closer for Georgia fans. A lot of Georgia fans already in Florida, and Georgia fans travel extremely well anyway. I have lots of friends that had already bought tickets to both, or airline tickets to both venues until we find out which one, and then they sold the other ones. So I wouldn't be surprised, guys.
Barney Young Jr.'s got your back there, Brett. Georgia's defense had one bad quarter all year, and now folks are saying we aren't good anymore. LOL. Don't doubt the defense.
Hey, I'm completely okay with every Michigan fan telling me that I am out of my mind, that you guys are going to dominate and crush us, and we're not even going to get past the 50-yard line. Those are all things I love to hear. I absolutely love to hear that stuff, and that's the way I want people to show up to the game. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's likely to be a one-score game, but I do think in the end Georgia walks away with the victory.
Uncle Rico. Uncle Rico's here all the time. He should know better than that. I tell it like it is. I'm always respectful of everybody that comes on here, but if I agree with him, I'm of course going to say, I agree with you, and I'm going to continue the conversation. But if I don't agree, I'm going to say, wait a minute, just like did it a couple times in this conversation with Brett. If I've got a different viewpoint, come on, Uncle Rico, you know better than that.
Georgia's not an invincible team, obviously. But again, I keep going back to the consistency of the teams we played, regardless of what you think the strength of schedule is. There are teams out there with terrible strength of schedules, and they can't shut 3 teams out in the season. They can't hold 5 teams to under 6 points. They can't hold 8 teams to under 8 points. So when you look at that, you have to say there is something serious about this defense. And after I think especially in college football, the moment we see something that doesn't go around the way we expect it to, then we just automatically, this team's been exposed. They're really a terrible team, and that's traditionally not the case. A team may have a problem, and if they get it fixed, it can be pretty tough to beat them again. If you look throughout the seasons and you look back, especially at national championship teams, there's very few national championship teams out there that have an undefeated season. That's why it's so incredible. What usually ends up happening is at some course during the season, this team will lose a game and it galvanizes them. And the question is when do they have that loss and how does it affect the team? I think getting punched in the mouth by Alabama in the SEC championship game is exactly what Georgia needed. And that being the case, I think it galvanized the team. And I would, from a trash talking standpoint, not just from a college football analytical standpoint, I would not want to be the team that played Georgia after a loss. I really wouldn't. Just like I wouldn't want to be a team that played Michigan after a loss, or I wouldn't want to be a team that played Alabama after a loss. Mississippi State lost to Alabama the following week after the Texas A&M game, 49-9. I mean, it's just not one of those things that you want to see. You don't want to see a team normally after they lose a game.
Yeah, so along those lines, I don't exactly know how to try to determine the psychological portion of this, because as I see it, Michigan has had a season that no one anticipated. They beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten. They weren't even ranked in the preseason.
Mm-hmm.
And so they outplayed expectations. Georgia, ever since 2017, has been targeted as this is the expectation. You got to get to the SEC championship game. You got to win it. You got to get to the playoff, etc. And that's where they've been. So there could be a thought that Michigan's playing with house money. Now, does that make Georgia more motivated and Michigan more just happy to be there? Or does that make Michigan more carefree, play loose, play free, Georgia more uptight, anxious, nervous, feeling the pressure?
I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. And a big one is that Georgia started out with an expectation of winning a national title. That was the expectation from the go. Those guys have been all about business all season. And now you get to the end and you've had so much success that you feel like we got it. We've got it in the bag. And then what happens? You get your rug jerked out from under your feet and you get brought back to reality. And you will see, and I don't expect anybody to do this other than diehard fans, but those of us that pay attention to the press reports at practices, those that listen to what's really going on inside the program, the ones that follow these players on Twitter, you'll find out exactly what the team's mentality is. This Georgia team is serious now. You don't hear any trash talk coming out of Georgia. You don't hear any of that stuff. Michigan has a player who's out there saying that nothing's going to stop him. To me, that's an indication that you're not showing that you've been here before. You're showing that you haven't been here before. You never give another team poster board material because all the coaches are going to point at it and they're going to fire it up, and all of a sudden you may be the best player on the team, but now you're a target, and you made yourself a target. And to me, that's going to be interesting. It takes me back to the first year that Missouri joined the SEC. First game they ever played in the SEC was against Georgia, and they asked one of the Missouri wide receivers what he thought about Georgia, and he said, "We're not worried about them. They play old man football." Halfway through the third quarter, I was at that game in Missouri. Halfway through the third quarter, their fans got up and left. And as they were leaving, all the way at the other end zone, down the field from where I was at, they had aluminum bleachers. And you could hear the Georgia fans down there chanting, "Old man football." This is back when Aaron Murray was playing. And it just reminded me that you don't ever want to give another team poster board material. You just don't want to do it.
Uncle Rico, sorry. I don't even remember what the comment was now. Something about me not challenging or whatever it was. So my apologies. You were talking about the mods, whatever you were saying about the mods. Okay. Very good.
Somebody brought up a question of what is the all-time record against Georgia versus Michigan. It's 1-1.
It doesn't matter.
And the last time we played was 1965. Very
Yeah.
few of us here were even alive, if any.
Inconsequential. Yes. Yeah. So just in terms of the SEC and the Big Ten, I think it's pretty easy to see that the interesting kind of narrative or storyline anytime these conferences get together, and they will when Tennessee and Purdue play, and Kentucky, Iowa, and Penn State and Arkansas, and of course this one that really matters, is that they're the two conferences with the most money, that get the best TV ratings, that put the most fans in the seat. Their attendance is the best. They get the most attention on television, and they own the sport in regards to money. So that makes it interesting. And they've got brands that eclipse the other leagues. So that's interesting, but it's easy to see if you just look at the results on the field that the SEC has distinguished itself. It wins more against the Big Ten than the Big Ten wins against it. And again, I'm going to hold to my 65-35 ratio. It's pretty close. And the Big Ten produces the second most NFL players. The SEC produces the most. And it's consistent. If you go year to year to year, it's almost exactly consistent. Like, I just looked this up the other day. Like, the SEC might have had 360 or 70 players in the NFL, and the Big Ten had like 280. And then whoever was third was well down from then. It's just
ACC was 208.
It's clear. It's a clear separation all the way through.
The biggest thing is that you have to understand when a lot of people, they say SEC bias, and I hear it all the time. Trust me, I hear it all the time. The thing about SEC bias is that you explain to me why a talent scout in the NFL has any SEC bias at all. He doesn't. He has zero bias to the SEC. He wants the best player because the NFL is about making money. And when it comes down to making money, they have determined over time, based on speed, strength, talent, skill, coaching, the players from the SEC tend to do better. They're a better brand. They last longer. That's why more get recruited. Otherwise, they wouldn't recruit them. So when you're looking at, every year they're pulling players from the SEC more than any other conference. I mean, the SEC, I think, produces more first-round picks. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at the talent level, you don't become a first-round pick for no reason. You just don't. Now, keep in mind that when you are putting that number of players in the NFL, those players play on teams in the SEC that SEC teams have to play against. So if you want to talk about strength of schedule, that's where the top players in the country come from. That's what we play week in, week out.
The only thing I'll say about SEC bias that I think is somewhat legitimate is everything that you just stated. I'm totally on board with. Is that before the season starts, any season, and there are rankings, there are projections made before anything's proven, I'm big into dismissing what's happened in the past and completely evaluating and judging what's on the field. So when we go into 2022, sure, I'll have my opinion, and my opinion is probably going to be that the Pac-12 is going to suck again. But I'll at least say, let's reserve all judgment until these teams step on the field and actually prove something.
I completely
and that's
agree.
the only thing that bothers me is that that there's a bias given by a lot of people and ratings and rankings given before they're earned.
And I completely agree. I think that you really kind of start to get a legitimate feel about week 4, maybe week 5. But one of the things that always seems to pan out is that if a team will consistently perform and you get to the end of the season and you've only lost one game, you're pretty much in no matter what conference you're in. Now, if your conference has scheduled 1 or 2 tougher opponents like a Notre Dame and you beat them soundly, then yes, you deserve the recognition that you should get for beating a Notre Dame. Teams should get some ranking qualification based off of their recruiting, but every single year I will pick the top 2, 3, or 4 teams, and I will do top returning players because I think that's a great indicator as to how strong your team is going to be. So at Georgia, if you tell me next year Stetson Bennett's coming back, I'm going to lose my mind. I just don't want Stetson Bennett. I would prefer to have an 8-5 season with Brock Vandergrift than I have a 10-2 season-ending loss with Stetson Bennett. I just don't want that. But if I had to base it on which one of those guys is likely to perform better based on experience, I'd have to pick Stetson Bennett. If he leaves, I'd have to say Georgia does step down a notch until I see more from Brock Vandergrift. I think a lot of teams out there get too much credit at the beginning of the season, and by the time you're week 6 or 7, the whole deck just about has shuffled.
Yes. So I'm going to bring up a year that you don't want to hear, and I wouldn't do this otherwise, but I see it listed every day on my videos. So what do you have to say about 1980 and how much that matters that Georgia hasn't won a national championship? So there's this term thrown out all the time by college football fans. Elite. Who's elite? Well, obviously Alabama's elite. I don't think there's any question, unless we're only going to have one program in the club, then Ohio State's elite. And then you can have an argument whether we're talking all time. All time, USC's elite. Are they elite right this second? No, they're not anywhere close. They're horrible. So then you've got all those sorts of variations, whether you're talking all time or kind of a mixture of the two or whatever. So where do you think Georgia stands in all that, and how important is it to win a national championship?
I think it's every team wants to win a national championship, but if I was basing my fanhood on just winning national championships, I wouldn't be a fan of Georgia. Nobody would be a fan of Clemson because they didn't win it last year. Nobody would be a fan of LSU this year because they've had such a bad season. Nobody would be a fan of Michigan because they haven't won a national championship in the past couple of years. Nobody would be a fan of Nebraska anymore because they haven't won a national championship in I don't know how long. So winning a national championship, while important, it's all something we all want. You have to come to the realization that just because your team doesn't win a national championship doesn't mean you shouldn't care about and love and enjoy your team. Now, if you want to have a conversation about who's elite, then let's have a conversation about what is your credentials for elite? Because here is what I would say is elite. First, I'm going to pick the very best team in college football history, Alabama, right? I think Alabama is the greatest football team in history. They have more national titles than anybody else. They're consistently top ranked in recruiting. They consistently outcoach people. They consistently do what needs to be done to make themselves relevant. Now, that same team will tell you they don't want to play Georgia every other week. Now, if your biggest competition or the guy that you're trying to beat is telling you he doesn't want to play you back to back to back, that's an indication that you're probably elite. I'm sure that he would not want to play a LSU from last year over and over again. I'm sure he wouldn't want to play Clemson a couple of years ago over and over again. But if you asked him if he wanted to play Notre Dame, he'd be like, yeah, that's no problem. You guys want to play Florida? Yeah, that's no problem. You guys want to play Nebraska? Sure, line them up. How about Oregon? Yep, ready to go. But based off of what you've seen, where the way Justin Fields played at Ohio State, I wouldn't want to play. I didn't want to play him. I would play him, but I didn't want to. Just like I don't want to play Alabama again. And I think that if you're trying to figure out who is elite and who's not elite, take a look at where your recruiting rankings lie. Take a look at college football playoff appearances, not just national championships, because they hand out one every year among 130-something teams. It's extremely hard to win. Otherwise, everybody'd have 10.
All-time NFL first-round draft picks. Ohio State 1, USC 2, Alabama 3, Notre Dame 4, Miami 5, Georgia's at 3rd. Michigan's at 8, Georgia's at 13. That's, of course, all-time, so you're going back to forever. all-time NFL draft picks. Those were first-round picks. Notre Dame 1, USC 2, Ohio State 3, Oklahoma 4, Michigan 5, Alabama 6, Georgia's 14. But then again, you can wait, okay, what's been more recent versus obviously that goes back to the beginning of the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I do like to point out is things that I consider elite is when you can consistently have, double-digit win seasons. Michigan does that. Ohio State does that. Alabama does that. Notre Dame does that. Oklahoma. Texas until recently did that. Georgia does that. Florida used to do it consistently. Auburn used to be pretty consistent. I think all of those teams certainly have capability of getting back to where they were. But I think if you had to put 5 teams on one hand, one for each finger, keep Georgia out of that. Keep Georgia out of that and justify your position if you can, because I bet you can. You're going to go Alabama. You can say Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia.
Are we talking about right this second or all time?
No, all time. All time. Now, you can't use Yale or Harvard either now.
Oh, if I'm going to go all time, I'm going to put Texas, Oklahoma, and USC in front of Georgia.
Okay.
And I'm going to put Nebraska and Penn State in front of Georgia.
Okay. Now, out of those teams, where are they at now?
Oh, right now, Georgia's an elite program. Georgia's third on my list right this second. Now, I'm not talking about the teams as they line up right now. I think Georgia's either the best team or the second best team in the country. I'm talking about a program. I think Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, and Ohio State are definitely elite. Oklahoma, I'd like to see a little bit more out of them in competing against the other top teams in the country. They seem to always get smashed.
Georgia in all-time wins is ranked number 15. Michigan's ranked number 1, and Ohio State is ranked number 2. Even if Georgia was to win the next 53 straight games, we still wouldn't have as many wins as Michigan. So I'm not trying to say that Georgia has more wins than Michigan. There's more to a football team than just wins. If you look at, consistently, what is your, how have you done over the years? What is your overall record for bowl games? What is your overall record against conference opponents, out of conference opponents? Not just, cupcakes, and every team plays cupcakes. But if you look at, the fact that Georgia's previous head coach averaged like 10 wins a season, the current coach we have is averaging almost 11. I think that says in and of itself that this is a football team that is going to consistently perform. And that's one of the things I look at is when you have your worst year, when you have your down year, how bad is your down year compared to your best up year? I think Georgia's pretty consistent. I think Ohio State's pretty consistent. Typically, Clemson's been pretty consistent since Dabo Swinney got there.
All right. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. So much appreciate Big Dog Brett for stopping by for the conversation on Georgia and Michigan. And we will continue this debate and this conversation concerning these college football playoffs all the way through until we're actually sitting here after the game and saying, that's what happened.
Yeah, that's what happened.
We were right. We were wrong, whatever it is.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, Mark.
Well, let everyone know what you got going on over on your channel. We'll pull up your banner here so everybody can follow you.
Appreciate that. So you guys can just type in Big Dog Brett in the search bar for YouTube. You should be able to find me. Not difficult to find. I also will simulcast some of my stuff to SEC Voice of College Football and the Georgia Voice of College Football. Obviously for Mark, we appreciate him being on his channel, enjoying the content. I enjoy all of the commentary from everybody, even if you don't think I enjoy it because it's not favorable to your outlook on me. I enjoy any conversation with anybody about college football because when we're talking about college football, we're forgetting about all of the other things in our lives that drag us down. College football is something that brings us all together in one way, shape, form, or fashion, and we try to have fun with it. I enjoy the trash talk. I enjoy the smack talk, but I also enjoy the analytics and also enjoy getting to know other people in the college football community. So appreciate you guys.
One more super chat to get to. Sue is watching us all the time. Sue, we appreciate you being here. You know that. So I looked at Sue's comment. I pulled it up right here, found it online. Current NFL rosters 2021 season. Alabama 53 players, Ohio State 47, LSU 46, Georgia 35.
I was going to say I can name 4 right out of the gate. Nick Chubb, Todd Gurley, Matt Stafford, Jake Fromm. I mean, that's 4 right there. DeAndre Swift is 5.
Sony Michel.
Sony Michel, that's 6. I mean, that's just right off the top of my head. So
now, some people might be a little surprised. The first team that surprises me after Georgia at number 4 with 35, Notre Dame 34, Clemson 33, Iowa 33. Iowa's got as many players as Clemson and Notre Dame, and Florida at 32, Michigan at 32.
I really like the Iowa football team. My wife has family back in Iowa, and I've always admired that the Iowa football players and the whole stadium really will turn around and wave to the Children's Hospital that's built into the corner of the stadium. I've always thought that is one of the classiest things I've ever seen. Those guys in the middle of a football game will stop and they show those kids all of that love and attention, and I think it's wonderful.
Absolutely.
So, no matter whether they go 0-10 or 0-12 or whatever, I'm always going to have a lot of respect for Iowa.
Absolutely. One more time, everyone. It's Big Dog Brett. Head on over to his channel right here on YouTube, and we'll be here after the game. Check out Brett's content, and we'll have fun for the rest of the bowl week leading up to the college football playoffs on Friday night. Big Dog, we appreciate you stopping by, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you.